Welcome to Vape News Radio, the voice of vaping. In each show, we share the latest about regulations and things you need to know, plus upcoming conferences and fests, along with interviews with the movers and shakers in this fabulous vape space. Are you looking to get into this ever-expanding marketplace? Do you want to master this industry? Listen up as Norm Bauer, the vape mentor, shares it all. And here's your host, Norm Bauer.
Hello and welcome to Vape Radio, the voice of vaping, and this is show number 69. I'm Norm Bauer with Vape Mentors, and today's show is sponsored by Your E-Liquids. Are you a retail shop without your own house line? Do you already have your own liquids but lack consistency or confidence that they are offering you a product you can stand behind? Your E-Liquids offers you a turnkey 8-week program to develop your own line and includes help with marketing, branding, and expansion into the wholesale channel if you wish. For information, just contact me here at Vape Radio. That's Norm at vapementors.com. I also wanted to let you know we're going to be offering a free webinar series on how to open up a vape shop. I'll be sharing the essentials and also offer a master's course. If you are not on our mailing list, you can visit vapementors.com and sign up for our classes. On to our show. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a problem in this country. Actually, there's many of them. But today, we're going to talk about one that has become an epidemic in the vaping industry, and that is the increasing number of lawsuits. As much as we enjoy freedom and without question the most free society in the world, this is my opinion, mind you, sometimes we have too many freedoms. One of them is the ability to sue anyone you wish, whether you have grounds or not. Someone does you wrong, you sue. Were you guilty or were you not? It doesn't matter. You still must defend yourself. To put this in more personal terms, in the vape space, just having a business, any business, exposes you to liability. If you have a brick and mortar location, you can be sued. If someone slips on e-liquid on the floor and gets hurt, you will probably get a letter from an attorney. If you sell a defective product, you can also be sued whether it's your fault or not. If you make e-liquids, you are absolutely a target for a lawsuit. What brought this topic up was two lawsuits that have gotten quite a bit of press. They are both against major e-liquid companies and allege that they knew that they had quote-unquote dangerous ingredients in their products and did not disclose it. What are these dangerous ingredients? As you might expect, the two culprits are, okay, wait for it, take a guess. You give up? Yep, you're right. It's diacetyl and acetylene propyl, also known as the smoking guns behind popcorn lung, which we hear about all the time. There's still a question about how much of these ingredients is safe to inhale and how much is dangerous, as well as the question of whether the manufacturers knew their products contained these ingredients or whether they didn't. Some of the biggest names in the business are being targeted, and that includes Cutwood, Molecule Labs, and 5 Pawns. Oh, and by the way, the owners as well as the employees of these companies are also named personally. Could you be a target if you make liquids? The answer is absolutely yes. But unless you have deep pockets and a noteworthy stature along with a substantial bank account, you are probably less likely to get sued. But you still must protect yourself and all your assets. As I was contemplating this particular radio show, I initially called it The Epidemic of Fraudulent Vape Space Lawsuits, but I had to pause due to an email I got from a radio listener. Mark was his name. He said that I was only telling one side, and he alleged that when I said that 5 Pawns, and I quote, pissed off the wrong people and said that the plaintiff was just looking for a quick settlement, well, he accused me of, this is his words, being desperate to make deep-pocketed friends to help finance your interest. Well, I had to laugh since I do in fact have many friends with pockets of all sizes, but I pander to no one, just the truth. That's what we do here at Vape Radio. I told him if there was another side to this story, then he should share it, and as you might expect, I heard nothing back from him. Does he have a point? Are some of these lawsuits truly legitimate? The truth is, the details of these suits is private since they are ongoing and active cases, but I can say that based on what I was told behind closed doors, these cases are mere disguises of extortion. Where does the truth lie? I was contacted by attorney Ryan McQueeney from Chicago. It seems that he has been involved with the Diacetyl lawsuits for over a decade and actually defended the real microwave popcorn manufacturers where some of these injuries did take place and employees got the first cases of this nefarious popcorn lung. This following interview shares his experience as well as his opinions on popcorn lung, bogus lawsuits, and rightful causes. I would love your opinions on whether you think these cases are warranted. So let's roll with it.
Today's topic is, of course, the epidemic of fraudulent or bogus lawsuits in the vape space. Now, for those of you who pay attention to the media, you may have heard that Cutwood is being sued and Five Ponds is being sued. And what are they being sued for? They are being sued for Diacetyl. They are being sued for lack of disclosure. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we have is unfortunately, fraudulent claims being done by attorneys who are looking to dive into the deep pockets. And I don't mean to set a bad tone, but we actually have an attorney on the phone right now for an interview. And so he's going to speak to what exactly is going on in the lawsuits and kind of tell us what's going on both sides. So Ryan McQueeney is with ARNETT Law Group. They're out of Chicago. So Ryan, welcome to Vape Radio.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And I didn't mean to slur the occupation of attorneys, but of course it's no big surprise that there's a lot of them are opportunists, but we're not going to go into that. But I just wanted to kind of introduce you and talk about what your background has been in representing defendants over lawsuits and what you think could be coming around the pike for the future.
Sure. My experience really started about 6 years ago, and I represented a company that was a distributor of raw diacetyl among other chemicals. They were in what they call the specialty chemical industry. They provided chemicals that are used in developing flavors that are used in the food production industry. And what happened was in about 2000, 2001, microwave popcorn plant in Jasper, Missouri. There's about 250 people who worked in the plant, and it was determined by an occupational doctor in Kansas City that there was an epidemic of bronchiolitis obliterans in the plant. There were 9 plant workers who were diagnosed with bronchiolitis obliterans. It's a very rare lung disease. Typically, it would be found in 1 out of 40,000 people. In this case, there was 9 out of about 250 workers. What was fortunate in this case was that the microwave popcorn plant essentially has 4 ingredients. There's kernels of corn, there's salt, there's oil, and then there's butter flavoring. And this physician notified the Missouri Department of Public Health, and they went in along with NIOSH, which is the investigatory arm of OSHA, and they quickly determined that they ruled out the kernels of corn, the salt, and the oil, and they concentrated on the butter flavoring. So over the next few years, NIOSH conducted some investigations. They researched previous cases in the literature, and what they found was that in this mixture of butter flavoring, there was about 100 different chemicals that make up the butter flavoring, and what they determined was that there was something in the butter flavoring that was causing the lung disease, and diacetyl just happened to be the most prevalent chemical in the mixture that made up this butter flavoring. And in 2002, a study was published based on the research that was done at the plant in the New England Journal of Medicine, where they indicated that the bronchiolitis obliterans in the workers was caused by something in the butter flavoring, and they felt that diacetyl, being the most prevalent chemical in the mixture, was the most likely cause of the lung disease. At the same time, kind of parallel to NIOSH's study, a law firm in Kansas City was representing a number of those workers, and really before NIOSH had even come up with their results, had filed lawsuits against the companies that were supplying the butter flavoring.
Excellent. So, Ryan, let me ask you a few questions, if I may. So, if you were to look at this as an epidemic, would this kind of be patient zero? I mean, this is where the diacetyl question came up and what eventually turned into what we call popcorn lung?
Yeah, it's interesting because what happens is, you've got these parallel tracks, okay? You've got science, the scientists, the NIOSH people, whose job it is to come in, and when there's occupational danger or hazard, it's their job to determine what is causing the the harm and how to prevent it. And they're not necessarily concerned so much with making somebody who is injured whole. On the other hand, you have the legal system and attorneys who are not necessarily concerned with fixing the problem and identifying exactly what the problem is. Their job is to get compensation for the injured party. So what's important for everybody to know in this industry who may be facing some of these issues is that in the world of science, in peer-reviewed articles, there's a higher standard as to whether something causes disease or not. In the world of jurisprudence, the legal world, it's somewhat of a lower standard in the sense that you're going to hire experts who are going to say a certain thing that may be defensible scientifically, but has not been conclusively proven. But the attorneys are arguing to a jury.
All right, so Ryan, let me interject here if I may. So rather than go down that road, which is a little bit more legal than we need to get into, let's talk about where we stand today in the vaping industry, because the people who are listening right now probably fall into one of a couple of categories. They are either consumers or vape users, or they are brick-and-mortar owners, or they are e-liquid manufacturers. And, of course, if they're an e-liquid manufacturer, this whole controversy over contamination is a major, major blight. And the truth is that the regulations have been non-existent. The safety factors have been, for the most part, ignored by a good percentage of the industry. So what we have today is we have people who have legitimate cases against e-liquid manufacturers, because it won't come as a surprise to anyone who's listening, but yes, there is diacetyl in products. So let's talk about two things. One is there what you would call an acceptable level of diacetyl, where even though you're inhaling it as opposed to eating it, that it is considered to be okay or safe? And then the other question is that these people who are suing, from an attorney standpoint, do you see this as being the tip of the iceberg of something that you're going to see in the future? So let's talk about the diacetyl issue, about how dangerous is it, Ryan? Is it something that we should all be overly freaked out about? Obviously, these people who were involved in the lawsuit at the popcorn plant, they had serious damage, but are we correct in assuming that they took levels that an average vapor would not be exposed to?
Yeah, let me take the second part first, because I think the question of whether, how much diacetyl is dangerous and whether it's seriously dangerous is, I think, something that even now you may never be able to figure out, and depending on the toxicologist and who's hired them, you might get a different response. The way that occupational health and safety works is they try and determine a level below which most people will be safe, okay? Let's take cigarette smoking, because I think it's the closest thing that everybody understands this. But if, only 20% of the people who ever smoke cigarettes are going to come down with a disease related to cigarette smoking. And even now, scientists don't know why cigarette smoking causes certain diseases and doesn't cause other diseases. There's always going to be this sense of, when we look at the numbers, we know that cigarette smoking is not healthy. We know that the chemicals in cigarette smoke are dangerous to a certain level. But doctors don't know why only 20%, why does somebody who smoked for 50 years and is 85 years old never come down with lung cancer? So a lot of this is, broad population-based. And what the scientific community tries to do is they try to identify the hazardous chemicals, and then they try and set a level below which they can say, 90% of the people are going to be safe. That's pretty much as exact as they can be. And so when we talk about, is there a safe level of diacetyl to be inhaled in an e-juice or vape? You're going to get a couple different answers depending on how many people you ask. I think that the better way to think about this is, and we're talking about legal liability here, is when the 9 people who were first identified, 5 of them were very seriously injured. I think 4 of them ended up being on a lung transplant list. So
oh my,
that's very serious injuries. A few of them were not so badly injured. They were all essentially exposed to the same level, but it's the difference between having 25% lung function and 75% lung function. If you have 75% lung function, you may not even realize that your lungs are abnormal until you try to run the mile. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So as clearly when the plaintiff's firm starts off, they're looking for the most seriously injured because that's where they're going to generate the highest fees or verdicts. But once they get down to the majority of the injured population, they're not going to be as injured as, they're not going to be on the lung transplant list. So it's kind of this sliding scale. And if I can just take a step back, the legal theories that the plaintiffs will be attacking the industry under will be what's called strict products liability, okay? And under strict products liability, you have, when you sell a product, put it into the marketplace, and that product is determined to be unreasonably dangerous to either the fact that the purpose of the product is to put something into your lungs that can cause damage to the lungs. If that's determined to be unreasonably dangerous, then there's, you can cure that by having a warning. And if the plaintiffs can say, well, the warning was, you failed to warn, or the warning was inadequate.
Is that what's behind the current spate of lawsuits that we're seeing? Is they're saying that some of these targeted e-liquid companies did not warn them that there may be something in there that's dangerous?
Well, I think that it's going to be a number of, the lawsuits that I've seen have been consumer lawsuits, and they're not claiming injury. They're claiming that the consumer was not informed that what they were buying contained diacetyl or 2,3-pentanedione, which is similar to diacetyl and has been used as the replacement for diacetyl in the food industry, but is similarly toxic.
All right, so let me ask you, does that mean that if in fact there was a disclosure on there that there might be diacetyl in that, would that be any type of defense?
To those consumer fraud cases, it would be.
Hmm.
And the consumer fraud cases those are economic damage cases. So if I purchase e-juice for $8 and relying on the fact that there's no diacetyl in it, and then I find out that there was actually diacetyl in it, the damage to me is the $8 that I spent.
Yeah, you feel deceived
Right.
that they didn't disclose anything. Well, here in
Right.
California, we have some very stringent laws, and there was a proposition that said that if you are in an area where there might be any type of carcinogens, you have to disclose it. So almost everywhere I go, I see these warning signs that there may be some type of anything there that could cause any type of carcinogens in the air. So, obviously there's a knee-jerk reaction. So to be able to kind of bring this into focus for the vapors out there, do you see that in the interest of prudence that every e-liquid manufacturer should get everything tested to make sure that their products do not have any diacetyl? Is that a defensible position?
Well, I think that's one aspect. Because as I understand the industry, you have the flavor companies, the companies that are actually making the flavors that they then either sell online or they sell through the brick-and-mortar stores. And then you have the brick-and-mortar stores that make their own flavors by purchasing the raw ingredients. And I think that there needs to be some sort of industry standards as to some sort of testing. I can tell you this. In order to develop a lawsuit in the first place, the plaintiff's firm has to test the product. So they have to have a plaintiff, somebody who's willing to sue, who purchases, a particular brand of juice. And then they go in and they have to have that tested, and then there'll be a third-party testing facility. And if that third-party testing facility comes back and says there's actually diacetyl in this, then they have the basis for filing the lawsuit. But, if you think about that, they have to do the testing themselves. And I think that if I was in the industry and I was selling those, I would want to have quality control to make sure that the product that I was selling did not contain diacetyl, acetaldehyde, or acetylene or...
Well, and the truth is no one wants to put out a bad product or a dangerous product, certainly not knowingly, and usually I think this is not done knowingly. It's done because of lack of knowledge, because, a few years ago, anyone and everyone was making e-liquids, and it hasn't changed all that much, unfortunately. But now you have a lot of the big players who are getting their products, their ingredients from, of course, third parties, and they don't always know what level of testing these have been done. So in the interest of time, we could actually go on a long time. And again, for those of you who are really intrigued by this, we'll probably have some type of a follow-up because this is probably not going to go away. I reached out to other companies and I said, is there anyone out there besides, again, Cutwood and Five Pawns that are being sued? And so I'm still waiting to hear back from several others to see if they're interested in sharing their story. So from a legal perspective, do you see this, and I don't mean to, again, defame your profession, but do you see that there are probably law attorneys out there that are specifically going to go out and seek people who want to put together some type of a class action suit just in the interest of trying to settle a claim?
I know for a fact, and these are the same people that I've, who I defended cases against over the past 6 years, and the same doctors. Dr. Alan Parmet, I know, is looking into this. He believes that there's going to be an epidemic of bronchiolitis obliterans in people who vape. I don't know about that. You'd probably know better than I do about the demographics. I think vapors tend to skew younger. And even if there was diacetyl in all the vaping juices that people were using, you'd still only be looking at, a certain percentage. But, even that could be a huge avenue of litigation for the plaintiffs' firms. My job is to advise companies and kind of see down the road into the future and what is going to happen. And, when I was defending these companies, I came in years after decisions had been made, emails had been sent, things had been said in the press, and my job was to try and deal with that. Knowing what's going to happen and how these firms work, my advice would be, before the lawsuits come down, and there may not be anything you can do about it other than try and make sure that there's no diacetyl in the juices that you're selling, but that may not be always possible. I think that if you're involved in this industry, you have to be very careful about what you put on your websites, what the trade associations put on their websites, what gets said in emails. I've seen how very innocuous things that are sent in emails or put on websites can be twisted and turned against you when, 5 years from now when you're sitting at a deposition and one of these plaintiff's attorneys is asking you questions, you'd be surprised at how horrible some of the things that are said.
No, we wouldn't be surprised at all.
Right.
We've seen the movies, we've seen the TV shows.
Right. And what I think is important is to, be aware of that and try and develop a strategy that inoculates you as much as possible as a business or an industry from these types of lawsuits. Because, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which side of the table you're on, the standards for getting a case in front of a judge or in front of a jury is a lot lower than it is getting a paper published in a scientific journal as to whether diacetyl is actually dangerous or whether it causes disease. I know that we've talked about this before, the idea that diacetyl is in cigarettes, and people who smoke cigarettes probably get more diacetyl in their lower lungs than people who would vape juice with diacetyl in it.
Interesting to know. Thank you.
But the question is, why don't we see people who smoke with bronchiolitis obliterans? And you don't. People who smoke and get disease end up with emphysema, COPD, or lung cancer. So that's, it's very intriguing. I know within the scientific community, there's a lot of questions as to why diacetyl by itself would cause a disease, but diacetyl in cigarettes wouldn't cause a particular disease.
Well, that's a conversation that we'll save for another time because it really is a little bit of a Pandora's box, and the deeper you go inside the box, the more questions that are raised as opposed to questions that are being answered. So I'm going to go ahead and link your contact information in the show notes, but should someone want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do that, Ryan?
My email is rmcqueeney, McQueeney, at ARNETT Law Group, that's ARNETT lawgroup.com. And my direct dial is 312-561-5677.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of Vape Radio and all the people who now are hopefully a little bit more cautious against being sued, we thank you so much, and we look forward to catching up with you the next time.
Great. I'm very happy to do it, Norm.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, don't go away. We're going to be back in just one moment.
So there you have it, guys. There is no issue that diacetyl is a harmful ingredient. There is also no question that some e-liquids contain it and did not state so on the labels. What now? First off, get any and all harmful ingredients out of your products if you're a manufacturer, and take the high road and know that you are a target for litigation whether you want to be or not, and whether you did something wrong or not. Be sure you have insurance. We use Calco Commercial Insurance, and we're going to link to them in our show notes. Also, make sure that your labels are legal and adequate. Make sure that you have your products tested by a lab. That's always a good idea, and we have one that we deal with out of North Carolina we can introduce you to, and we're very, very pleased with them. Be careful what you put on your websites and marketing material, as well as within your internal communication. You never know when that casual conversation might be deposed, and you're going to have to go defend what was going on in internal communication. And it's best to take a defensive position regarding liability because, as I said, you are a target whether you want to be or not. As to the current and for sure the future litigation, that we're going to hear about and where the truth lies as the time comes. Can we call these cases frivolous? Can we call them justified? I really don't know, but I'd love to hear your opinions, and we're going to share them in future shows. Also in future shows, we're going to offer our new program called the 2016 Vape Industry Survival Guide, and also guess who we have coming up in an interview very soon. It's our old buddy Grim Green. He's going to be talking about vaping products as well as knowing which ones to buy or to sell if you have a retail shop. That about wraps up Vape Radio Show number 69, and thanks again for listening. Do you have a topic you'd like to hear, or do you have something to share? Send us a note to norm@vapementors.com. And before we leave, I want to offer you all a great opportunity. Would you like to get your product, service, or message in front of our targeted vaping audience? Vape Radio is the #1 radio show in the world with more than 1.2 million downloads and over 120,000 unique views a month. We were one of the top 10 business podcasts of 2015 on Podbean and beat out more than 130,000 other shows. For just $750, you get your company integrated within 3 different shows, and we are looking for one more advertiser to fill our spot. How about you? Contact norm@vapementors.com. That's it for show number 69. So until next time, vape on.